Well, hello, greetings, and welcome to this virtual advisory committee meeting number 4 for the Woodson Terrace Comprehensive Plan. My name's Stephen Ibendahl. I'm the project manager for our plan. I'm joined with us with Bob Lewis and Carrie Falkenrath from our team. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Bob Lewis. I've been working as a planner for 50 years and now teaching at St. Louis University, consulting on the side, if you will, doing a lot of work with the I-5 group, and have been looking at some of the economic development and housing opportunities for Woodson Terrace. Carrie.
I'm Carrie Falkenrath, T-Squared Traffic and Transportation. I do traffic engineering and transportation planning. And like Bob, right now, I am also teaching at St. Louis University. So we have a theme. Transportation planning and then the traffic engineering that goes along with it to support it is what I bring to this project.
Well, thank you, Bob and Carrie. And the purpose of this video is to do a virtual committee meeting for this go around. And also, if you're interested in coming to the March open house, you can use this video to kind of catch up where we are in the process. So besides Bob and Carrie, some other members of our planning team. And if you're new to the process, you can catch up by downloading the discovery report that was issued last fall that has the existing conditions, community survey results, and other engagement results from the process that was released in the fall. And we hope to be starting to get close to the ending part of the comprehensive plan process later this spring, early summer. Some upcoming events. We have our next open house on Tuesday, March 3rd. The open house will be from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Woodson Terrace Community Center. And what you see in this video will be what also will be presented at the open house. So again, feel free if you don't have a chance to come by in person. This video should catch you up in terms of where we are in the process. And the open house on March 3rd will be a come as you go open house. It won't be any formal presentation, so feel free to stop by anytime between 5 and 7 p.m. So on this video, we want to highlight in terms of the results of some analysis we've done in terms of 3 possible scenarios for Woodson Terrace. At our previous advisory committee meeting, we presented a framework for each of these scenarios to the committee, and since then have been looking at how these actually start to lay out within the community, and also some of the strengths and perhaps concerns with each of these scenarios. So basically, 3 scenarios. Scenario 1, airport gateway district. Really leaning into the airport's consolidated terminal program, taking advantage of Woodson's existing cluster of hotels and really kind of being the front door, both to the airport and also the future of what Terminal 2 becomes down the road. Really looking at those visitor amenities and perhaps airport support services along kind of the front door of Woodson Terrace. Scenario 2 is what we're calling a family focus. We've noticed from the data, a lot of younger families have moved into Woodson Terrace over the last 10 to 20 years. Larger household size, also a shift to more Spanish-speaking families. And so this scenario is looking at in terms of really being more family focused in terms of making sure there's available housing, available parks and rec amenities, a much more walkable community, really kind of that family focus. And then scenario 3, in some ways, is similar to a lot of the family focused perspective, but being more of a senior destination that, again, besides younger families moving into Woodson Terrace, the Discovery report showed us that Woodson Terrace also has a large population of folks who've maybe lived and even grown up in Woodson Terrace, aging in place, and how maybe they can have additional options in terms of different housing types to accommodate that aging senior population, both in housing, services and other kind of retail amenities in Woodson Terrace. So an important note as we kind of talk through these different scenarios, it's not about choosing one or the other scenario. A better way to maybe think about these are a way to frame the analysis and research. Elements of each scenario may overlap, and then the final comprehensive plan may include recommendations from each of these scenarios. So it's more about wanting to hear from the advisory committee, wanting to hear from the community, uh, preferences and priorities that may flow from the discussion and research on these three scenarios. So we're starting with scenario one. So we've been looking at, for each of these scenarios, we've been looking at economic development, transportation, parks and recreation, housing, and staffing. And we'll start to walk you through what each of these kind of mean, especially from a kind of a land use and transportation perspective for the city. So this first map you see is scenario one, airport gateway district, and maybe perhaps some of the economic development opportunities associated with this scenario. I'll let Bob kind of talk about some of the highlights of this scenario.
Here. Thanks, Stephen. Well, as everybody knows, Woodson Terrace used to be kind of the main way into the airport and very a central part of airport activity for this metropolitan area. No longer that case, but it still has an important role, as we all know, with the rental car companies, the hotels, et cetera. We think that this master plan, combined with what MoDOT's doing in the area and the airport's master plan coming on board, that Woodson Terrace certainly could position itself to be a much more important part of the airport, even though in a different position. That while there won't be a real link necessarily for a lot of traffic going in and out of the airport, the services should still be offered, maybe expanded, to help the airport be a much more successful, world-class place as it is an international airport. So maintaining, improving the facilities along Natural Bridge is important, maybe growing them, offering some of that. You can see it in brown here, some spaces that are underutilized, maybe vacant today, but still along that nice wide Woodson Road for airport services, back office things, consultants, office buildings, services that could use the airport while not taking up airport land could be an opportunity. Maybe even expanding some of the depth of some of the business activity along Natural Bridge. Also, it's I-70 in the metropolitan St. Louis. It's a place for signature buildings. So positioning Woodson Terrace to better serve the airport and help the airport better serve the world in many ways.
And to highlight a few things on the map, you kind of see there in terms of the circles, 5-minute, 10-minute walk, and those are from kind of the intersection of Woodson Road, Natural Bridge, kind of the existing. If you could walk directly there, the Metrolink station. So we've highlighted some of the existing hotels that Woodson Terrace has a strength of. Several, actually, almost brand new hotels, right there along Woodson and Natural Bridge. So highlighting that strength of their existing hotel cluster and starting to have what we call kind of a visitor amenity area that would be within walking distance of the intersection of Woodson Road, Natural Bridge, and then if there was a connection, the Metrolink station, and then also the entrance to Terminal 2, which would be a good segue here as I let Carrie talk about transportation.
So when we talk about transportation, as Bob mentioned, Woodson Road was historically kind of a corridor to the airport, and there's been a lot of community feedback through the years about the loss of that connection. For those of you who are attending the public hearings or the advisory committees for the airport and MoDOT's I-70 project, you'll know that there was a lot of conversation around a potential linkage because of that years-long community desire. And what they found from the communities now is that the feedback has been that there's no longer as much desire for a vehicular connection because of the probable loss or relocation of Terminal 2 to the combined terminal. So, but what's still important to the communities and what we've heard is that the pedestrian linkage is still important. Not only does it get you onto the airport property, but probably more importantly would get pedestrians across I-70 and into Metrolink or to Metrolink. So hoping and praying that that connection is still there and it looks like it's moving forward. And building off of that connection to the airport, if nothing else for that visual and pedestrian kind of connection, and then tying that into, as Bob and Stephen mentioned, kind of a destination hotspot, which when there is a destination, you're more likely to have pedestrian movement, transit movement, even vehicular movement. So what we would do is kind of look at that 10-minute walk from the Terminal 2 Metrolink station as kind of the visitor district for airport visitors. And then beyond that, not forgetting the rest of the corridor, would be kind of a less intense kind of a community streetscape. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but making use of a smaller right of way that exists kind of south. And then further south is a school zone streetscape, but focusing right now on that north connection, we would want to improve the visitor experience and draw attention and travel to kind of that airport node or that services node with additional pedestrian lighting, better walkways, maybe some additional transit stops. If we're looking here at the existing corridor, thanks, Stephen. We know that there's a lot of room out there. There's 4 lanes of traffic. We've already discussed the fact that you can see in the pictures, there's not necessarily the volume there that is supporting or warranting those 4 lanes of traffic. So how can we better utilize that in multiple ways, but we're just talking about the airport gateway district to make it a more attractive destination, both for the companies we would want to bring in to provide kind of that airport district, but also the visitors to it. So we're looking at enhanced lighting, visitor wayfinding, more attractive and more useful sidewalks, maybe with some street trees, some benches. Tried to get there are bike lanes on Woodson Road right now, but they aren't necessarily super functional. They're a little narrow, so trying to make those more functional and more inviting, and kind of give that destination node more character and more support. And then another option, then taking it even one step further, would be not only would we kind of narrow that road and make more room for pedestrian activities, but then begin to calm traffic by instituting some additional amenities such as median islands and grass buffers and things like that.
And what other thing you kind of mentioned on this option too is that you see this will kind of overlap, segue into our Parks and Recreation discussion. Kind of later on the right on that top photo, the idea of there's several kind of underutilized, even vacant parcels along Woodson, maybe turning some of those into pocket plazas that either through kind of a private investment or a public-private partnership. You look at 9 Mile Garden down in Afton along a Gravois, where again a private retail establishment invested in some plaza programming space to kind of better serve their customers. So there are some precedents regionally in terms of this type of approach. That's kind of a good segue into then the Parks and Recreation discussion. So this kind of a plan view, maybe some potential locations for those pocket plaza along Woodson Road, within walking distance of the hotels. So again, folks visiting the area, a place to walk to along, Woodson, either to restaurants or some of those plazas. Also making better connections into John Brown Park from Woodson Road. There are several parcels, a street, some options there to perhaps have some direct connections from Woodson Road into John Brown Park, which is one of the strengths of the city, not only from our viewpoint, but also what we've heard from residents in terms of the park being one of the jewels of the community. So scenario two, a family focus, and again, we'll kind of talk you through some thoughts there in terms of like economic development, transportation, and parks and rec. And again, here the focus is really looking at. Again, we've heard a lot of things about Woodson Road being a great place to live, quiet, quiet neighborhoods, safe, and really how to kind of expand those strengths to support not only existing families but to attract new families to Woodson Terrace.
You're putting Bob back on the spot here. Uh, Note that this, as we talk through this, this is not inconsistent with the previous scenario. Can be connected with it and made use. As we've all noticed, Woodson Road is no longer the retail traffic generator that it used to be. So an attempt here is to consolidate whatever retail can be supported, which can be fairly substantial, but put it all more in one space. You can see that in that small business retail red pink area. Let's make a bit of a village shopping area there, dining area, event center connected nearby, and use some of that other now really effectively vacant, underutilized spaces along Woodson. Turn it into more infill residential, maybe townhomes, maybe apartment buildings, maybe senior housing, as we'll talk a little bit later, to liven up and densify Woodson Road a little bit, complementary to the traffic ideas that Carrie just talked about, and create more, well, people in the area that will use the restaurants, the parks, and the services as well. This is going to also be a supportive of the airport facilities because people who stay at the hotels or come in and spend a little time from Metrolink can also enjoy the small business areas and walking around a much more walkable kind of an area. One of the aspects I like of all this is we're beginning to think of consolidating our business, but also incubating some businesses. Woodson Terrace can be a great place for small businesses to get started, ideally grow and expand as they improve their capabilities with relatively inexpensive properties in a broadening environment here with more people, more visitors, particularly from the airport, and with an advanced transportation system. So an exciting opportunity, but not in competition with the airport support as well. Carrie, you
Yeah,
think about it, Carrie?
yep, from a transportation perspective, the way we can kind of look at this is with the airport focus scenario, we are putting a lot of our transportation focus at that north end. Really trying to put a lot of bang for our buck into drawing eyes and traffic to that location. And when we talk about family focused, we still are looking at Woodson Road, but not as the ultimate destination and more as the connector or the connection corridor. And so we start to think about more feeding into the neighborhoods and making the connections into the neighborhoods, which is what you're seeing here. We're looking at making some new connections with sidewalks to some of the existing sidewalks. What's not shown here, but another thing we're thinking about is maybe identifying a network of bike-friendly streets that could have their own signage and maybe even some traffic calming measures. And those would really overlay similarly with the sidewalk connections, but they would help each other from the fact that the traffic calming would help both pedestrians and cyclists. The more people you invite to the street, whether on wheels or on feet, kind of puts more of that non-motorized traffic in the area, gives everything more of a friendly feel, more family feel, and more eyes on the street. Another important thing I wanted to note is that as we implement some of this infill development that Bob talked about, we're giving our community and anyone who is any visitors on Watson Road these little almost mini destinations where when we talk about the airport focus, we have a big destination at the north end. But when we're giving these pocket parks and these infill residences and maybe some new businesses, we're creating these new destinations that keep people moving down the street and keep people kind of filtering to and through Woodson Road. And it kind of becomes more of a linear hub hub for the community. And so what we're seeing here is a great image, existing view, kind of this is south of that, what would be kind of the airport focused area, but more in the community area. It's got a narrower kind of right of way, but we still have a lot of pavement to work with. There's still existing sidewalks out there, and we could look at shifting those, putting a buffer in, maybe widening one to a multi-use trail on one side of the street. If we have infill, either residential or business, and we have some room and some additional room for right of way, another thing we could think about is some on-street parking where that's available, which really gives those visitors somewhere that, when they see a place they want to stop, they can pull right over and stop there. So again, it kind of calms this area and makes it inviting and turns it into this community-wide corridor.
And then from a parks and recreation aspect of the family focus is really looking at, John Brown Park and also Herbert and Stansbury Park. On John Brown Park, a couple of major ideas here would be, one, as the next generation of the pool is thought about, perhaps starting to transition from swimming pools and more perhaps a splash pad type of recreation facility. Many communities have done this. Municipal swimming pools. You have a lot of labor in terms of staffing with lifeguards. You have a heavy kind of equipment investment where things like splash pads you wouldn't need the same level of lifeguards and supervision, the same level of water treatment and those things. So it may be a way, although the pool has been kind of a historic asset for the community, perhaps a way to maybe again kind of modernize the way folks approach kind of aquatic recreation. And that could be tied in also with an appropriate size recreation center that there's examples throughout the St. Louis region, Shrewsbury, others in terms of smaller communities having what I would consider kind of a smaller sized indoor rec center. They maybe perhaps don't have the complete bells and whistles of some larger rec centers, but maybe you have multi-purpose basketball, pickleball court. You have some indoor fitness. So you have some of the key things, and perhaps as an extension of the existing community center. So thinking about kind of this next generation of what John Brown Park could be. And then with Herbert Park, Stansbury Park, the idea of, right now with it completely surrounded by residential houses and just, the narrow sidewalls, leading in, it's going to be very challenging for that to be successful, long term. That, again, a long-term strategy would be, it doesn't matter which side this would be, but, the ability to acquire 2 to 3, say, houses in a row, turn those into actually the entrance into the park, with parking, entrance plaza. It would open up that park to the neighborhood, to the community, and make it give it a chance to be a really a functional space, as opposed to right now a very isolated green space behind those houses. Our third scenario is what we're calling senior destination. And here again, we've heard from the community and we've seen with our own data, there's a strong, significant part of the population that lived in Woodson Terrace a long time. They're aging in place. Would like to stay in the community, but perhaps the maintenance of a single family home is no longer suitable or desirable. So how to make perhaps Woodson Terrace not only attractive for existing seniors to stay, but also as a way maybe perhaps bring in new residents from other seniors who see the focus of Woodson Terrace placing on the importance of their senior population. I'll let Bob talk a little bit again, kind of the economic development side of that.
Yeah, as Stephen pointed out, we're all getting older, and it's certainly true here for the next 40 years, really, in the metropolitan area of the United States. And we're going to need more facilities that are a little kinder to those of us who are aging. That means maybe more density, less maintenance, fewer yards to mow, and that sort of thing, and opening up some of our single family homes and otherwise for younger families. And that trend is already underway a little bit in Woodson Terrace and certainly in the Midwest or the middle Northwest St. Louis County area. So creating a senior housing opportunity will cater to a great many Woodson Terrace residents. But as Stephen alluded to, maybe many more up there in the Northwest County part of the region, particularly south of the airport, where Woodson Road offers that opportunity with plenty of transportation. You're going to see a little bit more on that when Carrie speaks. And creating a little bit more density, a community of older people, but a community that's also mixed very well with younger families. And nothing works better actually for a community than mixing the kids with the grandparents, if you will. And a lot of activities can be generated along those ways. And but also allowing all the older folks to remain in the community, a place they're familiar with. We need their leadership and their knowledge and their commitment to the area. And it might mean some that actually come from nearby communities as well. That also means we've got audience market for community event spaces, for recreational opportunities, more utilization of the parks, and a motivation for some parts of the lesser used parts of Woodson Road, the private properties, for not only retail and dining, but also healthcare services, maybe wellness services as well. And as pointed out here, we can maybe even have some healthcare training things going on where we've already got a college existing. So it's a great opportunity to take advantage of both as the previous scenario talks about, the whole community, but then focus a lot on the seniors. And there's going to be a bunch of us to take advantage of all that. Carrie.
So from a transportation perspective, we're really similar to what we talked about for family friendly, except we take a little bit of that focus and pull it back onto Woodson Road, really focusing on making Woodson Road kind of a gold standard accessible street, thinking in terms of very strong pedestrian connections to places where we know there is senior housing or is a strong senior destination. Focusing as we re-envision, I guess, Woodson Road, thinking about where potential transit stops could be for a senior shuttle route or just a more organized kind of paratransit service, either something private, something working with your neighbors. Metro offers this paratransit service, but making it really logical and easy for seniors to utilize. And then as the potential for this senior development in the area grows, thinking long term, what about Woodson Road becoming another transit corridor for Metro Bus? And where could Metro Bus stop? And what do those stops look like? Maybe using, instead of on-street parking, you carve out spaces for future bus stops. And that would include spaces, landing pads with benches and potential weather protection for a bus stop. Outside of transit, we would be looking at things like benches and rest areas, lots of shade for seniors specifically, or although anyone moving through this area. We'd think in terms of some really good signage, really good kind of landmarking from the standpoint of signage in the area and even just placemaking in the area, which is helpful for seniors to actually navigate their way around, but making Woodson Road a very visible, active corridor that really kind of defined those movements for seniors between the places that they live and they want to go would be really important for that corridor. I think, oh,
I
there you
think
go.
with parks and recreation, similar to, again, to family focus in terms of facilities with some focus on John Brown Park improvements and perhaps again kind of the right sized for the size of Woodson Terrace, a indoor recreation center. But we're thinking about programming in terms of making sure programming incorporates that senior thinking and activities. If you do an indoor rec center, having an opportunity for indoor, pickleball, the importance of, is an existing walking loop in the park. But as we talked about, having those pedestrian connections to the park, to Woodson Road and then to the neighborhoods. And then also, intergenerational programming that the city already does a good job of hosting, various community events, some youth programming, the summer, pool, aquatic memberships, but thinking about ways perhaps to combine, youth recreational programming with, senior programming, having that intergenerational programming within the community. So those are the three scenarios. With each of the scenarios, there's some strengths and perhaps some challenges, concerns. We highlighted some of the strengths as we went through, but I'll just let Bob and Carrie and I'll chime in terms of just some final thoughts and some key strengths and concerns that maybe we haven't mentioned yet as we've gone through each of the three scenarios. So I'll let Bob kind of go first. And Bob, you're on mute.
See,
There's always one. Yeah.
there's always one. There's
Yeah.
always one. Part of the, as we've talked about, one of the strengths that Woodson Terrace no longer has is as a retail center, attracting a lot of, but that's been going a long time, but we now have a lot of space to deal with, which makes that an asset. So let's build upon all that. You've seen a lot of some pretty good examples. We'd love to hear more from the public on what could be possibilities and so forth. One of the strengths in all that direction, also to retain, maybe attract population. It's a city of old homes, comfortable homes generally, affordable. They're not, most of them are not very expensive homes, but we want to also encourage reoccupancy of them and maintenance and reinvestment in them, but because they're a critical part of the housing needs of St. Louis County, and for the labor force in the county. And now that I mentioned the county, I want to emphasize there's also, if you're not aware, you should be, the St. Louis County has a new plan called County 2050. You read through that, and it's not hard to say, wow, Woodson Terrace can actually be a helper in implementing a lot of those good ideas that are in the county plan, and vice versa. So we've got a built-in partner here with some political power and resources. The county wants to certainly make sure its plan works, and most of the county is in municipalities. Woodson Terrace is right there at the airport, which is a huge economic force for the county. So partnering with the county. Now, some current concerns can come up with if we have a lot of economic development interest, particularly with what goes on at the airport, which is trying to become even bigger than it was. We might experience some residential encroachment, so we want to address, the community needs to address how it wants to handle that, like if we need some bigger, or businesses, we need some bigger spaces and so forth. But also some operations at the airport might inhibit bigger buildings. It's a little hard to tell with how they're going to do all that sort of thing. The buying power of Woodson Terrace is not strong, but it is consistent. It's also not one of the richest communities in the world, but I think we can certainly add to that buying power with more people. And as we've talked about, the more people, I think, is going to be done with some little higher density housing, particularly along Woodson Road. And becomes a place where it becomes a little more community, more people on the street, more eyes on the street, a little more vitality going on, and so forth. So we may not see a whole lot of job creation for seniors, but seniors don't need it. They're all got all that great Social Security, right? That we all have. Yeah, we'll see how long that lasts. But they have buying power. When you get to seniors, they aren't savers anymore to speak of. They want to enjoy their lives and spend their money, and that creates more opportunities for retail incubation, some kinds of businesses that can cater to, well, a wide range of age groups, including the kids. And I'm going to finish up on the kids side. The demographic data we've analyzed for this planning process really show that Woodson Terrace is a great place for attracting elementary and junior high kids. Looks like families maybe move on when they get to high school age from the data we can see, which is understandable. As you earn more money, get a little more earnings, you might be able to afford a more expensive home in another place. But catering to that elementary school level and the young families that tracks can also keep them in the community if the community is a much stronger place. So I think in many ways the strengths of Woodson Terrace, right in the middle of things, great access with the highways, with some big roads, and with some economic power generated by the airport, if the city itself will put itself in that position, along with some other population growth, some real possibilities for expansion and vitality in Woodson Terrace. Shall I move on to Carrie?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on that real quick because you mentioned a couple big strengths, I think, potential for especially for the airport district scenario, but actually all of the scenarios, and that's what's going to happen at the airport and what's going to happen with MoDOT on I-70. And we already know that there's discussions of at least a pedestrian connection across I-70. There's also I think it's almost assured that there's going to be improvements to the air flight intersection interchange. So we're looking at a better pedestrian and vehicular connection to the west. And there's also a proposal on the table for a new interchange connection to the east near Brown Road for Natural Bridge. So we're looking at better vehicular connections in and out of the city, which really helps the family focused, I think, also helps the airport district. Some of the weaknesses of that are we don't know exactly what they're going to do. We can't exactly make plans now. Another good point for Woodson Road that I want to make is that it was at one time and I think we've said this already, it was a very busy corridor. It had a lot of traffic and it had a lot of connections. I think there's been a feeling of loss over the years that those connections have gone away and the traffic coming to and through the community has dwindled. But I think that's creating what is now a strength and a potential for the community because that roadway still exists, that right of way still exists, and it is at the perfect time to reimagine it. And that space can now be utilized for pedestrians, green space to make it more inviting for the community. So you still have this primary corridor that you can utilize, and it is already a multimodal corridor with bike lanes, which is pretty rare, to be honest. And there is transit access, at the north end. Not a lot of communities get that. So that can all be leveraged and expanded and improved to really make Woodson Corridor really attractive, both at the north end for visitors from the airport, but all the way through then for families and seniors to really tailor to their uses. And I think that's a really clear strength and potential having a Woodson Road there and already with the width to really do something great with. As far as concerns, as I mentioned, we don't know what's happening with the airport. And we don't know what's happening with I-70. Those are still a little bit of question marks. But this is the perfect time to kind of get our arms around what our preferences would be or what the community's preferences would be so that you can make your voices known. The other thing is, Woodson Road is always going to be where it is now. It's always going to connect to Natural Bridge. What we've just kind of found out during this process is there probably won't be another connection across 70 to the north. But we can leverage potential for pedestrian connections and other ways to connect it into the community. I think that's it for me.
And just kind of in closing, as I mentioned at the beginning, as you think about these three scenarios, again, it's not necessarily thinking about, scenario one versus scenario two versus scenario three, picking which one. It's more about looking at what elements of each of these scenarios that may be preferable, maybe a priority for the community. Because then, in the end, with the final comprehensive plan, it may be actually probably will be a blending of different elements of each of these scenarios that these all can kind of work together in the different parts of Woodson Terrace. we also touched on, we also mentioned a few recent and ongoing planning efforts. Bob mentioned the St. Louis County comprehensive plan that was uh, recently adopted by the county, last year. So again, it's good timing for this plan. Take advantage of some of that countywide priorities in terms of focusing around the airport, helping support planning at the municipal level. Uh, Carrie mentioned in terms of kind of the ongoing work with the airport master plan and program. Also, MoDOT's look at the 70 corridor. So those again, this is a good timing for the Woodson Terraces comprehensive plan in terms of helping making sure that priorities are shown that can help influence decisions with that planning process. And then one plan that we haven't mentioned yet is that MoDOT will be kicking off here early this year a study of Woodson Road, basically from Natural Bridge, through Woodson Terrace, through St. John, and just slightly south, kind of the three communities along Woodson Road's corridor. I think it's about a year long or so a study. So again, Woodson Road is a MoDOT road. So some of the things we were showing in terms of concepts, and then some principles in terms of maybe important to the community can hopefully help shape the conversation as MoDOT does their study of Woodson Road this year and next. So with that, so again, some next steps. So we would love your feedback on the three scenarios, again, in terms of elements that are preferable for the community, maybe some priorities. You can share those comments. You can come to the open house on March 3rd, which is the Tuesday. Stop by anytime between 5 and 7. There'll also be an opportunity you can share your feedback if you go through the website. There'll be a link on the website to share comments about the three scenarios. We'll be collecting those here in February and March. So again, a very, very important time during this comprehensive planning process. And again, we see the final plan being wrapped up here later this spring, this summer. So again, this is kind of a very important part of the overall process. So again, thank you for your time today. And again, we'll look forward to either receiving your comments or seeing you at the March open house. Any last words, Bob or Carrie? All right. Well, thanks
Thanks for listening.
everyone.
You bet.